I was studying this executive who had this leader who had the ability, I think, to stay calm under the most, really grueling circumstances. He worked really inside this cutthroat culture, but everybody really liked working with him because, he just had this ability to be very, very effective, to be an incredibly high performer, but he always was able to keep his calm. And so I wanted to understand why. How was he able to do that? And one of the things I realized is that sitting on his desk was a sand timer. So I asked him about it. I said, hey, what do you do with that sand timer? And he says, oh, this is very, very important for me, he says. Whenever I have a problem or whenever I have a worry that is nagging at me, whether that be in my personal life, whether that be in my professional life, whenever there's something that's kind of bothering me, what I do is I shut my door and I take this sand timer, it's a 5-minute timer, and I flip it over. And for the next 5 minutes, all I do is just focus on that one problem, focus on that one worry. And I said, well, what if it's something you can't do anything about, something out of your control? He says, it doesn't matter. I still focus on it for 5 minutes. And I said, well, I got to be honest with you. That seems like a recipe for anxiety. To spend 5 minutes kind of like going into your problem. I would imagine coming out of that 5 minutes, it's going to feel worse. And he says, no, never. It always feels better. And so I started to look into the science behind this. And what I started to realize is that, we tend, I think especially as people who tend to run optimistic or tend to sort of be higher performers, what we tend to do is we actually tend to shut problems out. Or we try to ignore them and focus on like what's going well, or we try to ignore those problems and we try to sort of move on to the next thing. But what ends up happening to a problem if you ignore it is that it actually grows in size. It starts to take more and more mental bandwidth. It starts as a whisper, it grows into a conversation, and eventually it grows into a shout and a scream until it gets so loud that it's actually taking you very much out of the other moments of your day. You're in a meeting, you're with your colleagues, you're with your team, but you're not really there. You're not really present. You're with your family, you're with your friends, but you're not really there. You're not really present because this problem is sort of nagging you. And what the science basically tells us is that if we spend just a focused amount of time hearing out the problem, hearing out the worry, counterintuitively, it doesn't actually turn up the volume on it. It actually turns it down. There's a saying in positive psychology that what you resist will persist. And by trying to ignore a worry, by trying to ignore a problem, what you're in some ways doing is you're resisting it. And if you're resisting it, it's going to persist. But again, on the other hand, if you spend focused amount of time just thinking about that one thing, it has this really interesting way of turning the volume down.